Hey class, this is Andrew Franklin, and today I want to start some nascent discussions on research methods. To begin, this discussion will center on how individuals acquire knowledge. In everyday conversation, people will often say something on a topic and then follow up their remarks right after by saying, facts. Or the individual listening to it will say in response to what they just heard the phrase, facts. This is done as a validation technique or an affirmation to self or someone that what is said is true or right. This notion of something being fact or accurate intellectually is relevant to research methods and the scientific method that we'll be discussing in coming lectures. After all, scientists have their own means to determine if something is true or accurate, though it should be noted that conclusions are usually stated tentatively instead of definitively. Before we get started, I think it's important to establish the relevance of research methods as a course. So we'll start there because I know some of you all are like, let me just click through or passively listen to this presentation, and I really want you all to lock in. So consider the following questions. Do you have questions about the world around you? Maybe questions about how social media affects mental health. Perhaps you have questions about factors linked to professional success and graduation. Even more so, you may have questions about factors that influence people to stay in healthy and unhealthy relationships. There are many ways to answer these questions and get facts as it relates to your interest, and we'll talk about those methods and strategies here. The scientific method is usually employed by researchers in the social sciences, and our discussion on various methods people use to get facts will set us up nicely for a future discourse on the scientific method specifically. Now, most students take this course Now, most students that take this course say they are doing it because it's required. And I feel you. You made a decision to study human behavior, and now you have to take this science course that isn't really focused on people or psychology, and you're just trying to make it through. You want to be a therapist, or you have an interest in IO psychology, or maybe cyber psychology, and this course feels like a necessary, or rather a required evil. However, I want to point out a few benefits of taking a research methods course and learning about the various ways people seek to answer questions about human behavior. One, it will help you to be a better consumer of the vast amount of information that is presented online. We are inundated with social media reels and news clips and YouTube videos that have various claims and things said as truths or facts. We need to be educated consumers of information, and learning about research methods provides you with analytical tools to do that more efficiently since it provides a carefully developed system for answering questions. Many of the skills you develop in this course can translate to career readiness competencies as well, since employers value critical thinking, analytical thinking, information management, and the list goes on. So while the course may feel like a required evil to just get through, it actually has relevance to your everyday life, and learning about how the method of science is used to answer questions about human behavior is important. So without further ado, let's get started talking about the various approaches people take to determine if someone is speaking facts or if something is facts. So everyone has knowledge, everyone knows something, and we all have questions about life around us. So to answer these questions, we use different strategies. My plan here is to define each of the strategies, talk about their limitations and times when using them would make sense. The first strategy I would like to discuss is tenacity. Tenacity as a word gets at persistence, and in our case, we are talking about the persistence of ideas. Tenacity is assuming something is true because it is something you have always been told or it is a cultural norm. Examples of this include the myth about needing to wait 30 minutes after eating before going swimming. There's no research that seems to support the idea that it is a bad idea to go swimming right after you consume food. There's no method for correcting knowledge gained by way of tenacity, and thoughts that are widely accepted by the population at large are difficult to change. There are many myths and superstitions like stepping on cracks and bad luck or dying in your dreams, indicating that you die in reality that really have no research support. These things are believed because it's a norm or the saying has been said for a long time. The next strategy I want to discuss is intuitions. Intuition is when information is accepted as true because it feels right. The strategy of intuition says that because it feels right, it is right, or it's true and accurate. People often refer to this as a gut feeling, and they may use this approach to resolve moral dilemmas or decide on what is ethical or right in certain situations. Sometimes what we call a gut feeling or our intuition is really us just interpreting facial expressions, the voice, and subtle body movements of others. The problem with totally relying on this to determine what's facts is that we have no way of distinguishing accurate from inaccurate knowledge, and just because something feels good or right does not mean it's accurate, true, or facts. The method of authority is exactly what it sounds like, taking something someone says as facts because of their perceived expert knowledge. This is a useful starting point for trying to understand something, but sometimes authorities are speaking from their personal opinions, and sometimes experts can have completely different takes on a question. For example, consider how a Democrat in public office might answer a question about immigration versus a Republican. We see the influence of authorities in sponsorship deals we see celebrities have obtained by viewing their activity online. We live in the world of sponsorships. People will assume expertise in one area translates to expertise in another. Some people believe that because an athlete can get a ball through a hoop several times in 12 minutes or on demand, that that skill suddenly makes them an expert on life insurance and athletic clothing. They stand next to the clothes and say that it is the best microfiber gym shorts in the world and you should buy it. And they want you to believe them because, after all, they're an expert, but only in a certain space, only in a certain field. Another example is a world renowned chef that is suddenly able to offer relationship advice because people assume that expertise translates to other areas, which is not necessarily the case. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, listening to an authority could be a good first step, but we have to be careful with this because not all experts are actually experts. It helps to check backgrounds and credentials and experiences. We are conditioned to use the method of faith, which is believing what someone says is true because of complete trust in them, as our parents may have demanded it while we were growing up, or perhaps they fostered a relationship in which that was a safe thing to do because they were reliable and you found that a lot of the guidance you received was indeed truthful and healthy for you. We may have complete trust in others like some do in religion and faith, but healthy, respectable skepticism is not bad to have. I should mention that there are ways in which we can feel more confident in listening to experts. We just have to take the time to ask ourselves critical thinking questions like, is the person really an expert? And if so, based on what? Is the information objective fact or simply a subjective opinion? Does the information seem reasonable and does it agree with other information that I already know? You can do the same thing with information you are accessing from websites. Is the website reputable? Do you have previous experience with the site? Are other sites providing the same information? It helps to confirm that other sites are providing the same information. So, the first three approaches we've discussed, tenacity, intuition, and authority, are good to answer some questions like where we want to eat for dinner or which outfit to wear to a homecoming party. But for major life decisions or answers to questions that could drastically change your life, you will need methods of acquiring knowledge that place more demands on the information and the answers they produce. The rational method is the process of employing reason as a source of knowledge. The rational method seeks to answer questions by logical reasoning. People typically begin with a set known of facts or assumptions and use logic to arrive at a conclusion. Examples might include two premise statements like the following: pizza has tomato sauce, that's number one, and tomatoes are healthy, that's number two. Therefore, pizza is healthy. That's number three, the conclusion that's made off the two premise statements. Another example is the following: you are a student at Norfolk State University, and Norfolk State University students love football. Therefore, you love football. In the previous example, a person is taking two things they know to be fact and putting them together to produce a third fact. Think of the rational method as you sitting alone in the dark, mentally manipulating premise statements to determine whether they can be combined to produce a logical conclusion. One specific limitation is that the conclusion is not necessarily true unless both of the premise statements are true, even in a valid logical argument. Pizza does have tomato sauce, and some tomato sauce is healthy. However, if a person orders a meat lover's pizza with extra olives, green peppers, and garlic sauce, that may not be so healthy with a sugar-rich tomato sauce. All tomato sauces, after all, are not created equal. So there's flaws in the second example as well. Yes, you go to NSU, but you may care less about football. Logic and the rational method has its flaws. The ability to arrive at a third fact or a conclusion is totally contingent on the truthfulness of the premise statements or the assumptions made before the final analysis. Because the rational method does not involve directly observing or collecting data, it has been said that logic is a way of establishing truth in the absence of evidence. Alright, so let's end this chat by discussing the empirical method. Empiricism attempts to answer questions by direct observation or personal experience. We answer many questions about the weather, food purchases, driving conditions, and others by way of the experiences we have had in our life in various places. We can answer many questions about the world around us by making observations. The challenge with this approach is that we could misinterpret what we see with our eyes. Our direct sensory experience can deceive us. Additionally, prior knowledge, expectations, feelings, or beliefs can drastically alter your perception. I'll go with an example to illustrate my last point. I once went to a buffet with my dad for Thanksgiving, and he asked me to taste two different kinds of meat and let me know which one I liked best. After tasting the meats, I pointed to the one that I thought was better. The one I pointed to was frog legs, and the other I did not select was chicken. My prior knowledge about frog legs almost made me reconsider what I selected as my favorite. Again, that example is another conflict between tenacity and empiricism. See how different sources and approaches can conflict with each other. What I'm showcasing here is that empiricism may not be fail-proof, and it may conflict with other sources of knowledge that involve different strategies. Empiricism is time-consuming and sometimes dangerous. There are times when it makes sense to use a rational method or listen to several authorities. Sometimes it is too dangerous to collect information, and one is better suited to consult or listen to experts on topics. For example, it may be too dangerous to travel to a country you've never been and experience driving on the right side for the very first time, even though it may feel like it would be more convenient to travel that way. It may make more sense to take a rational approach and think about the various ways that could end a car crash, you being seriously hurt, and elect to take a train or taxi to your destinations. In conclusion, empirical methods involve using direct observation as a source of knowledge. Direct observation can be casual and unplanned, or they can be systematic and purposeful. Alright, so I want to end this presentation with a series of learning checks. There's 3 learning checks that we'll go through, which will test your ability to apply these different approaches that I've discussed over the past 12 to 13 minutes. I encourage you, after I state the question, to pause the video so that you can take some time to reflect, decide on the answer, and then once you unpause, the answer will be showcased in roundabout highlighting in a matter of seconds. Okay, before we get started, I did want to mention this about the approaches, so keep this in mind. Alright, now before we get started, I did want to mention that people can use different methods to answer the same question, and sometimes they arrive at the same answer. And then there are other times where people use different methods to answer the same question and they arrive at different conclusions. So this really speaks to the subjective usage of some of these methods and approaches to determining facts, right? Because people are coming into situations with different beliefs, different experiences, which in turn may influence how they go about arriving at answers when they use intuitive approaches, and depending on the different premise statements that they're starting with as it relates to methods of rationalism, this could easily cause people to end up with different answers or sometimes the same answers. All right, first learning check. Which method of knowing is being used by a student who believes that his rabbi is interpreting the Pentateuch correctly? You can pause the video now if you need a chance to reflect. Okay, if you selected method of faith, you are correct. This is a sub-approach that falls under method of authority and involves people accepting the word of an authority because they have complete trust in the authority figure. You often see this in matters of faith, and you see this with children who have been socialized to accept what their parents are saying as, you guessed it, facts. Next question. Which method of knowing is being used when a person decides to share their contact information with a potential love interest? If you need to, you can stop the video right now. Alright, so this is a tricky one, but some things considered, if you selected method of intuition, that is correct. Often in these situations, individuals are going with their gut feelings and perhaps subconscious and conscious interpretations of body language, eye contact, gestures, and voice that may indicate a person's romantic interest. Last question coming up. Last year, Lord Dirk and his friend Tom Tom were both too short to ride the roller coaster. Tom Tom went to the park this year and was tall enough to ride. Dirk knows he is taller than Tom Tom now, so he figures he will be able to ride as well. Which method of knowing is Tom Tom using? Pause the video quickly if you need time to figure this out, and then press play when you are ready. If you selected the rational method, you are correct. There were two premise statements that Tom Tom viewed as fact. Dirk can ride the ride right now, and Tom Tom is taller than Dirk. These two premise statements allowed him to form a third fact, that fact being that he could ride the ride as well. So I want to thank you for viewing this video. We talked about various ways in which we determine facts, as well as how a skill set and research methods can really work for you outside the classroom. This sets us up rather nicely to discuss the scientific method in future lectures. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, let me know, and use the emojis below. Take care, and behold the green and gold.